Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we're going to go back in the days of yesteryear and catch up with young Wild West as we left him off at chapter 10. And our big adventure was he was having that adventure with Buck Wood. He had a fist fight with him. He had a horse race with him, which he whooped him good, proving that young Wild West was definitely the best rider and the best horseman. And so far, he's been the best shot and everything else. Quite the hero. He saved the girl from the Indians back in chapter 4 or 5. He came close to fighting with 2 other Indians, and now he has been off to the a fort, and we're going to catch up with him now and find out what young Wild West is doing. I hope you're all enjoying this story and taking us back into yesteryear, what they were reading in those dime novels from 1904. Not often do you get a chance to catch up on one of them or find it on PDF. So if you wish that you could read some of these, I have on PDF. Just send me an email and I'll send you out one, and you too can read it. This story or another. They're plenty good and lots of adventures. Simple reading for the most part, and that will be that. But it's something enjoyable. Takes you back in time anyway. So let's continue on with our story as we join up with young Wild West in chapter 10. And I'm going to share the screen over here with hopefully a file. Oh shoot, I had it put up here. Just give me a second, people. I had it up and now I don't have it up, and I don't know what I did with it. Don't you hate when you did that stuff? But anyway, I got it here somewhere, and I just had it, and I don't know what maybe I put it here. That's what it is. Don't you just love when you do that kind of stuff? It's all on one page. It's computery stuff, people. This is real live action, flying by the seat of your pants things. So we're going to go with that. And if you don't like it, well, leave me a comment. Maybe you could do better. So we're going to go back to this. Here we go. And I'm going to put me over here in the corner so you can see that. Look at that. There I am. And we're going to blow this up. Chapter 10. What did Buck Wood did? And let's go a little bit bigger like that. Okay, and then we can all see it. I wish I had cartoon characters for all this. But we're going to catch up. You have to close your eyes and use your imagination. That's what it's all about, people. That's what it's all about. Using your imagination. So, tell me if you have any like past lives or something, that you were an Indian or maybe a cowboy or a settler along the going out in the West, or maybe you were with the first pilgrims. I'm sure some of you do have memories of that. I would love to hear your story. Please write me an email, and address and everything is in the description below. So let's catch up on chapter 10. What Buck Wood did. Though Buck Wood was a coward, he was very vengeful in disposition. He wanted to be revenged upon young Wild West somehow, but he knew not just how to get at it. When he had pondered over it a while, he at last hit upon, we gotta go back up here, a plan whereby he might have his revenge upon the boy who had won the $100 and wrestled his laurels from him. He had been intimidated. Buck was a very bad character. He really had more friends among the Indians than he did among the whites at the settlement. He was on the best of terms with Gray Elk, the Sioux chief, having associated with him a great deal while the Indians were living on terms of peace. The plan Buck Wood had hit upon was too good, or to go and find Gray Elk and get him to put an end to young Wild West. The cowardly villain felt that he would be satisfied if, in order to kill Wild, several other whites went under too. It mattered not to him. He had a little feeling in his black heart that he possessed he went over the cabin to the cabin Andrews, where Andrews lived in that night, and after buying a drink of whiskey said, "I'm going to take a little ride out of town to them there mountains. Can't you fix me up with a couple of quarts of liquor to take with me?" "What you gonna do out that way for?" asked Andrews. "I want to see old Gray Elk and have a talk with him." "What for?" "Oh, I've got a little private business on hand." "You and Gray Elk are all right then?" "Oh yeah, he's one of the best friends I've got. I want to take that there whiskey for him, you know." Andrews did not appear to notice the request for the whiskey at all. "You'll run short or sort of a risk going out on the prairie just now. The Reds are out for blood, and some of them what don't know you might get her holding of you," he said. "I know about all those young chiefs under Gray Elk, so I won't be in danger. Their chances are that they are very first ones I'll run across will know me. If they don't, it's more likely I've heard of him, or they've heard of me. Anyhow, I'm going and take my chance of it." "You must want to see that chief pretty bad." "I do. See here, I'm going to put him on to Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie. They've done gone over to Fort McDonald, take a message. I found this out a few minutes ago, and then when they started, I heard old man Murdoch's daughter telling one of their women about it. If Gray Elk knows this, he'll be on the lookout for him when they come back, and he'll soon make an end to them. This place would be a good deal better off without either of them, I reckon." "I reckon it would. Well, are you going to let me have a half-gallon of whiskey take to that there chief?" "Yes, but you mustn't forget to pay me for it. You are pretty well in debt now, you know." "Yeah, I know, but I'll pay you every cent I owe you, just as sure as I live. If I go under, though, I'll make a mistake of them Injuns. You'll never get a cent, and I don't get you won't get it all. You ought to be willing to take your chances on it." "Well, I reckon I will." "Good enough. Put that there stuff on 40 canteens, will ya?" "All right." In a few minutes, Buck Wood was rigged out, and then, after accepting a stiff horn from Andrews, he went out and got his horse, which he had just finished feeding. He had seen Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie go before he went in to see Andrews, and when he took his departure, he was not over 20 minutes behind them. But, oops, that's called a bump in the road, people. But he did not attempt to follow them, knowing that he would be treated pretty roughly if they found him on either track. Still, he was going over there the same trail they had taken for them. He believed that the Sioux would return and make an attack on the settlement at the Forks that night. When he was within a mile of the settlement, he heard the sound of firearms in the distance, and he at once came to a halt. "What in blazes can there be the matter?" he exclaimed. "There ain't any one living at that there fort. Maybe Gray Elk thinks there is someone there, though I ain't out their difference yet. But I'll just wait here a while anyhow." Several more shots were fired, and then all was in still as a grave. It was bright, starlit night, and Buck Wood sat there waiting in the saddle. He did not want to get mixed up in any fighting just then. It might be that Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie were the ones the Indians had been shooting at. And then, again, it struck him that it might have been a troop of soldiers who had been doing the shooting. After thinking the matter over for a while and hearing no further sounds to indicate that there were any men, either whites or reds, about, he urged his horse forward in the direction of the shots had come from. He had not proceeded far when he heard the sound of hoofs in all directions. It seemed again the coward came to a halt. Then he looked carefully at the right and then the left, and noticed several riderless horses galloping about. Looks though there'd been a complete stampede, he muttered. Then more he thought it over, it was the more curious he became to learn what the trouble was. Finally, he concluded to catch some of the horses. The animals were not running away in a straight line, but were going about in circles. Occasionally, they would stop and feed on luxuriant grass for a moment and then go galloping away again. Wood rode forward and soon caught one of them. The moment he did so, he gave a satisfied nod. "Sioux ponies," he exclaimed. "I know what their trouble is now. Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie have sneaked up on and stampeded their horses, while Gray Elk and his gang was creeping up to the deserted settlement. That's the trick I would do. What a dirty trick." That was one utterance of a man told what a villain he was, better than a whole page could do. Oh, yes, he called it a dirty trick for the two whites to stampede the ponies of a hostile band of Indians. But let that be as it may, Buckwood knew a thing or two about getting a herd of stampeded horses together. Leading the one he had caught, he'd been riding among them, calling out a gentle whoa now and then. The result was all he could wish for, as he soon had at least 50 of them following him. All this did not take him more than 10 minutes, and at the end of that time he saw a couple of riders coming toward him. They were Indians, who had caught the horses and started out to do what he had been doing for them. "Hello, you fellers," he called out. "Where's Gray Elk? I've done their best I could do for you." "Ah," grunted one of the Sioux, as he rode up to the side of the white man, his tomahawk swinging in his hand. "It's me, Buck Wood, a friend of the chief," cried out the villain, noticing the hostile movement. The next thing he knew, he was seized by the collar and dragged from the saddle. "Pale face, heap much fool," cried Redskin, who has him in his grasp. "He go to Gray Elk and lose his scalp." "I'm a friend of the chief, I tell you," Buck posted. "Don't you see that I've been chasing your ponies for you? Take me to Gray Elk right away. I ain't going to try to run away." It so happens that the other brave knew him, and a moment later Buck was released. But they kept a watchful eye on him just the same. An Indian is very suspicious, more especially when he is dealing with a white man. The fellow who pulled Wood from his horse kept close to him as he helped them to corral the ponies. More of them kept running up on foot now, and as fast as they got their horses, they started to help catch the others. In the trifle over half an hour, all had their mounts back again, and then it was found that there were a half a dozen riderless steeds yet. These had belonged to those who had fallen before the uttering aim of Wild and Charlie. A few minutes later, Buck Wood was taken before Gray Elk. The chief was in a very ugly mood, but he greeted the villain friendly for all of that. "I know who was it played that trick on you there, chief," said Wood. "It was that boy called Young Wild West, and that Cheyenne Charlie, their scout for the fort." "Ah, Gray Elk must have their scalps," was the reply. "Buck Wood, he big brave. He friend of Sioux. He helped me catch the palefaces." "You're right. I will, Gray Elk. I'll shoot 'em both myself if I get her the chance." "No shooting 'em, catch 'em alive, and then we burn 'em at the stake." "All right, chief." And then putting his mouth close to the old scoundrel's car, he added in a whisper. Or his ear, not his car, his ear. "I've got some fire water." "Ugh," answered the chief, and pleased expression crossed his face. Buck handed one of the canteens over to him. Gray Elk unscrewed the stopper and drank half of its contents without stopping. Then, after a slight breathing spell, he swallowed the rest of it. "Good fire water. Buckwood, he big brave." Now we go catch boy and scout from fort. I guess I'll have a little drink myself, observed Buck, as he produced another canteen from one of his pockets. He took a pull at it and was about to put it back in his pocket when a redskin took it from his hand. Me want more fire water, was the laconic remark. Go ahead and drink, Chief. He did, and did go ahead and drink too, not stopping till the second canteen was empty. And that was enough for him just then, for it took effect upon him immediately. At first he was inclined to be ugly, but after uttering his old familiar war whoop 2 or 3 times, he slid from the back of his pony and fell into a stupor. Then the chiefs under Gray Elk crowded around Buckwood and demanded whiskey of him. I'll give you all I got, he said. I'll give you all I got, he said, and he did so. He tried to make them save a little for the old fellow when he came to, but it was useless. They went at it so eagerly that it was soon all gone. There was nothing left for the Indians to do now but to go to camp right there. Old Gray Elk was too drunk to stay on his horse, and besides, the chiefs under him knew they dared not do anything in opposition to his will. If they went on and took him along with them, it was him unconscious condition. He would surely censure them for it when he awoke. As the settlement was deserted, they had no fears of being attacked, so a campfire was at once started, and the tents they had with them were put up. The sun was up when Gray Elk arose. Buckwood was seated before the fire, boiling a piece of buffalo meat, when the old fellow came staggering up to him. Gray Elk want some more fire water, he said in an ugly voice. I ain't got a drop, Chief, was the reply. Their other fellas took it away from me last night, after you caved in. The redskin knew who he meant by other fellas. He promptly flew into a passion. To ease his mind, he began to kick wood all about the camp. The villain ached in every joint by the time Gray Elk's spite was vented, and the other chiefs laughed in their own particular way. Half an hour later, the band got in motion. It was the old chief's intent to get on the trail that led from Fort McDonald to Fort Bridger. Sorry about that, people. From Fort Bridger. To look out for stray wagon trains. He knew that the general uprising of the Sioux must be known to the whites now, and that being the case, those living in the few scattered settlements would be making for the fort. And in doing this, they would naturally head for the trail leading to the forts. That, Gray Elk judged rightly, was made evidently short before noon. A small train of 3 wagons was discovered by 2 of the scouts, who had been sent out in advance of the band. There were only a dozen men, women, and children with the wagons, so the outfit must fall an easy victim to the Red Friends. Gray Elk no sooner received the report that he gave the command to make for the train. The Indians rode at a swift pace, taking little pains to conceal their approach. They knew they would catch them anyhow. In about 10 minutes, the copper-skinned horde with the white renegade in their midst sighted the 3 wagons. The wagons were being drawn by oxen. There appeared to be only 6 horses in the train. This pleased the red men greatly, as they were sure now that their intended victims would have no show to get away. There were not enough horses for that purpose. The white men and their families, who were striving hard to reach a place of safety, did not observe the red friends until they were within half a mile of them. They urged the oxen forward in a vain attempt to escape. A couple of minutes later, a Sioux began to fire. Realizing that their only hope lay in making a stand, the little band of settlers halted and drew the wagons together, and then they returned the fire with good effect, and almost every shot sent a riderless pony over the plains. But the contest was too unequal to last long. Gradually the yelling horde of demons drew nearer, and presently the real slaughter began. One by one the brave band of whites went under, and in a few minutes there were only one left to tell the tale. This was a young woman. She had mounted a horse and was riding away when Buck Wood saw her. A young chief named Dead Leaves caught sight of her about the same time. Instantly the white scoundrel and the red friend started in pursuit. They had not gone over a dozen yards when Grey Elk saw them. "Ugh!" he cried. "Dead Leaves and Buck Wood race for the pale-faced maiden. The one who catches her have her for his squaw." When his followers heard him say this, not one of them made a move to join in the pursuit. They knew the old chief's word was law as far as they were concerned, and they were compelled to be satisfied. That a white man should have a chance to race for a bride? Meanwhile, Buck and the chief were neck and neck in the race, but the horse ridden by the young woman was a fleet-footed animal, and they were not gaining on her particle. Both had heard the words of the chief, and both were bent on winning the prize. "Ugh!" exclaimed the young chief. "Pale-face's horse run fast." "You can bet on that, Dead Leaves," retorted Buck. "I reckon that there gal are gonna go be mine. I see her first, anyway." Buck was crooked-tongued. "Dead Leaves see her first." "That's right. You can call me a liar, but if you want her. But this here race is going to be a square one. If I get her first, she is mine, understand?" And with that, Buck urged his steed forward at a faster gait, and got nearly a length ahead of his rival. A plucky young woman, who was racing so hard for her life, suddenly left the trail and headed for the growth of alders, and that was on the bank of the stream about a half a mile away, and her pursuers at once veered around on their course and followed. The Indians did not attempt to follow them to see who would be the victor. They were too busy in the rifling and of the contents of the wagon, stripping their victims of their scalps for that. Just as the fugitive neared the growth of alders, her pursuers began to gain on her. The horse she rode was a poor one and was giving out. The animal had been good on the spurt, but could not hold out. Dead Leaves uttered a yell of triumph. He did not seem to worry a bit over the fact that Buck Wood led him by a length. Buck was not so thick-headed, but that he took in the situation. He realized that the chief meant to have the prize, whether he reached the woman first or not. That meant that he must fight or give in to him. "If I get her there first, I'll shoot that there red devil before I'll let him take her," he thought. The fleeing horseman was now lost to a view in the clump of alders. The white scoundrel kept urging his steed, and it began a good one. He rapidly distanced Dead Leaves. "I'm going to win that, chief," he cried. "You may as well be giving in." There was no answer to this, but Buck glanced over his shoulder, and he saw that there was a look of hate in the Indian's eyes, and that he had drawn a six-shooter. He surely did not intend to kill the young woman he was racing for. Then he must be meaning for Buck. But Buck was now thoroughly worked up. He too drew his revolver. Into the clump of alders the two dashed. Buck went in the lead. The cry of triumph escaped the lips of the white man just then. The young woman's horse had stumbled and sent her over its head to the ground. She was in the act of rising to her feet to run away when a pistol cracked and a bullet went through the top of Buck Wood's hat. He knew where the shot came from. Turning in the saddle, he pointed his revolvers at the breast of Dead Leaves and pulled the trigger. The death cry came to the lips of the young chief, and he fell from the saddle, dead. "Now then, you put her, dear," called out the scoundrel. "I guess you're mine. Stop your running. I ain't going to hurt you." But the girl had seen him dealing bullets to her people along with the Sioux, and uttering a scream, she ran all the faster. But Buck swept down on her like the wind and stopped. "Stop running, I say," he exclaimed. "Never you friend and human before?" She answered. "Well, I'll have to catch her then. Here goes." And reining his horse, he dismounted and rushed toward the girl. She made a brave fight and lost, but she was determined that she would not be given alive to the scoundrel. Whipping a revolver from her breast, she placed the muzzle to her temple and pulled the trigger. Crack! The sharp report rang out, and Buckwood's prize fell to the ground, dead. As the villain realized what had happened, a feeling of terror came over him. The young woman had raced for dead, and was dead leaves, and so was dead leaves the young chief. What would Gray Elk do to him when he found this out? He'll kill and scalp me as sure as fate, he grasped. I guess the best thing I can do is to make for Fort Bridger and keep out of the way of the Sioux after this. He at once mounted and headed for the fort. And there we go. Chapter 11, the conclusion. So, well, now we know what happened for Buckwood. And let's see, I gotta get back to this. And there we go. So now we know what happened to Buckwood. Wow. He buddied up with the Indians, caught the horses that Cheyenne Charlie and Young Wild West had stampeded from the Indians, and now he was, after killing Dead Leaves, he is in trouble with Gray Elk. He knows it, and he's going to be scalped and killed himself. It's kind of sad that he had to hunt down that woman, and she had to take her own life. But I guess back in the day, them women there were probably worried about a lot of other things besides killing themselves. You know, torture and, you know, I don't know, torture and things like that. So who knows? I guess you can't tame a wild animal, and you can't cage an animal, period. Anyway, so that's the thing. So I guess that's what people did back then. Kind of sad to see. Anyhow, Buckwood is now running for Fort Bridger to join up with Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie. And I'm sure the Indians are going to be right on his tail. So join us next time as we find out the conclusion of what's going to happen to Buckwood and Young Wild West and Cheyenne Charlie at Fort Bridger. Sure is going to be a good one, so don't forget to tune in for another wild story of Young Wild West. And there we go. So remember, everyone, go out and do something nice, because you could have lived in those days when you could have been attacked, or you had to strive for everything you did. You could be rolling across the prairies. Hard times, people. Eating dried buffalo meat for breakfast or lunch even, or something. So anyway, be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. I love y'all. Thanks. Peace, everybody.